We get our power from within.
Yeah.
And that is the huge step.
Right.
Is remembering to always come back within.
That is good.
The Spiritual Shitshow Podcast with Suzanne Soul, episode 33.
Hello, all you sexy motherfuckers, and welcome to the Spiritual Shitshow Podcast, where we get into the train wreck the healing and spiritual awakening journey can be. I'm your host, Suzanne Soul, comedian, lifelong spiritual student, and I'm sharing some of the gems I've learned along my journey that have helped me, and that I hope help you too. Speaking of gems, welcome to another delicious episode of my series, Asking for a Friend, where I bring in amazeballs people like ministers, therapists, artists, content creators, and the like to help us all unpack the shit show of healing and awakening and ask those big, messy, deeply human questions. And I'm not just asking for myself, I'm asking for you. You're the friend. You know, there's a fine line between spiritual and spiritual bypassing. We get excited because we've had a couple of aha moments in Sage Star Kitchen, and we may think we're good to go. And we don't need to get into the real work of growing as a human as well. But babe, spiritual growth without growing as a person and gaining awareness of how you see your role in your own life is like sprinkling glitter in a junk drawer and calling it clean. I mean, don't get me wrong, affirmative spiritual practices are amazing, but you can't bypass your shadow with a vision board, and you can't affirm your way out of your anxious attachment style. Trust me, I've tried. Oh yeah. Oh, I've tried, girl. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And Jesus said, to love your neighbor as yourself. But you know, some of us need to learn to love and tolerate ourselves before we can love our upstairs neighbors who have obviously formed a marching band. And Maya Angelou reminded us that you can't forgive without growing up. So, you know, that's a truth bomb if I ever heard one. So what does it mean to grow spiritually and psychologically? What does it mean to understand how our emotional well-being and perspective is affecting our life? I mean, can we be spiritual but still emotionally unavailable or self-unaware? Or maybe the better question is, what do we lose when we don't nurture both our human and spiritual nature? When we use meditation as a means to avoiding our wounds or therapize ourselves into a corner with no connection to something greater? Well, we end up spiritually insightful, but maybe emotionally stunted, or self-aware, but feeling empty because we've disconnected from wonder, meaning, and mystery. And that's where today's conversation goes. And to guide it, I brought in someone who gets it on a soul deep level. Reverend Linda Jackson. Rev Linda is a minister at Cityside Spiritual Community in Chicago, a spiritual coach and teacher. As an ordained New Thought minister and spiritual coach, she brings the mystical and the practical together, like peanut butter and enlightenment. And she teaches a beautiful framework for consciousness adapted from Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith's work, The 4 Aspects of Consciousness: to me, by me, through me, and as me. So now you might be like, so what is this 4 Aspects of Consciousness thing? Is it a map? A rite of passage? A spiritual identity crisis in 4 acts? Yes to all of that and more. And maybe also a reminder that no matter where we are on the journey, our evolution continues on and on and on. So there's always more to learn and, of course, more bullshit to lovingly release. LOL. So grab your journal, your inner child, and your best "what the fuck is happening" face. Because today we're getting into the 4 aspects and other delicious insights. So let's get into it. Rev Linda Jackson.
Hi.
Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me here. It's nice to be with you.
You talk about something that I think is so important. And because there are so many people that are on the spiritual path and also people on the healing journey And something that I've heard you talk about that I thought was so cool that I would love for you to talk about here is that we're growing both spiritually and psychologically kind of together. So can you talk about that and tell me what that means for you?
So that's sort of ideally what we're doing. A lot of times, what happens is people set off in like psychological development and they neglect the spiritual side and they sort of have an intellectual understanding of healing and growth. Or sometimes people go into the spiritual growth work and get into the it's all good, it's all God, everything's okay. And we can call that a spiritual bypass if they haven't done the psychological growth work, if they haven't done the sort of shadow work, if you will.
So what would an example maybe be of someone who is doing the spiritual growth and kind of neglecting the psychological growth?
Well, you know, we all know the beautiful beings that are just all peace, light, and love, and they do all the spiritual things. They go to their spiritual community, they go to their yoga retreats, and they do all the things. And I'm not making any of that wrong.
Right, of
That's
course.
all really important stuff.
Yeah.
But then when there's something difficult that comes across their path, instead of allowing themselves to actually be with the difficult feelings, process it, and learn from it, the bypass is, oh, it's all good, it's all God, everything's fine, it's how it was meant to be. And ultimately, I believe that it is all good and it is all God. But as humans, we have to look at what's going on. And the greatest thing that we can do in our work is to develop self-awareness, to develop that witness consciousness, to be able to notice, how am I feeling? What's this body sensation? What's this emotion? What are my thoughts doing? And really being able to observe that so that we have this space between when something happens and how we respond to it. We get to choose, we get to decide how we want to be rather than in the knee-jerk triggered reaction from our past.
Right. So what kind of things do you think people can run into as issues or obstacles if they are in going that route of, you know, only developing their spiritual, only growing spiritual and not being, you know, paying attention to their humanity? What kind of, you know, how does that stunt their growth?
Well, you know, I think whether you do the spiritual work and the psychological work in tandem, I mean, sometimes it's happening a little bit of one, a little bit of the other, more subsequent, sometimes simultaneous. However it's happening, there's not a right or a wrong way, right?
Sure.
And even if we're only focused on one, spiritual or psychological, we always all have our stuff come back up again, right? Everything always keeps coming back up for us. It's just that every time we deepen in our growth, we have new tools, new resources, new understanding, new ways of responding to what's coming up, right? So if we're not really doing the work to understand what are the beliefs that are driving the behavior, what is the behavior that I have taken on as a coping strategy, how am I seeing through the filter of that belief, and I just keep perpetuating it because I can only see what I believe I'm going to see, so I keep perpetuating this whole experience over and over again. And if we don't have the awareness to know that that's what's happening, we'll just find ourselves in that, on that sort of treadmill.
So what I'm hearing is, like, if you're really, you know, deep in your spiritual path, which of course, as we both said, is amazing, obviously, and you're not attentive to your human journey, you may find yourself recycling similar situations and not, you know, the same thing
Yes.
over and over again, like Groundhog Day.
Yes, and we call that a spiritual bypass.
Yeah. Say more about
we're just
that.
bypassing the psychological growth. When we're just going for the spiritual, we're going for the high of that, the good of that, the all good, all God feeling. And it can become an addiction of its own,
Yeah,
right?
right.
To want that.
Right.
And again, I wouldn't be a minister and a teacher of all of these, concepts, philosophies, practices, if I thought it was not a good thing, because
Right.
it is. I mean,
Yes.
science of mind changed my life,
Yeah.
and I always say my dog and science of mind saved my life. But
I love that.
it's true.
I believe it.
And so that is a very good thing.
Mm.
And if we don't look at the shadow stuff, I make up the story that Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind, did not have trauma. So he focused on just keep your consciousness high. You don't need to know what the problem was. You just need to affirm the good. And there is power in that. But for someone who has had trauma, we've all had trauma,
Yeah.
really. I think it's just a matter of to what degree and what we made it mean and how it's impacting us, right? And so if we're not addressing the trauma, then it's going to keep coming up until we do.
Right. Right. And without strengthening our spiritual life, there's nothing to lean on when the psychological
That's
healing
right.
gets. I mean,
That's right.
yeah. I mean, I can speak to myself. I definitely leaned into my spiritual, knowledge, what I was learning so much during my own healing journey. So I totally appreciate that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I mean, I would not have, I wouldn't be here right now if I had not gone in the direction of spiritual growth work. So, again, not making it wrong, just realizing that we need to kind of weave the two together at
Both.
some point.
And then, I mean, not that there's like an end goal, but if you were to say, these are the green flags that tell you you're nurturing both growth, both growth.
That's an interesting question.
I just thought of it.
Yeah. So I think for me, if I just map it onto my own experience, I don't stop having triggers. I don't stop having the things that make me go like, and, adrenaline something and, thoughts start to go. They don't get me the way they used to. Because I am in that practice of witnessing myself, so I notice it. I can breathe. I can practice the things that help me stay, calm my nervous system, that help me stay grounded. And then I can assess, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's really going on here? What's really needing to happen? And then I can practice asking someone for more information, or can you tell me more about that, instead of me just filling in the gaps of the unknown and making up the story that's got me, running wild in my mind, right?
Which is so easy to fall into, no matter how much work. No matter how much work you do.
Exactly.
You're like, oh no. So I want to get into, you sent me some fabulous handouts. And one of them,
That's because I'm a graphic designer.
I know, and a fabulous one, BT Dubs, everyone. And this the 4 aspects of consciousness, which is adapted from Michael Beckwith's
The 4 aspects of consciousness, I originally learned them from Michael Beckwith's teaching, and he's written, lots of things about this. I think he might even have a book that focuses quite a bit on it. And then the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, I've also done a lot of work with them, and they talk about the 4 aspects of consciousness as well. So it's to me, by me, through me, and as me.
Okay.
And they're not linear. It's not like we start here and we evolve and then we're awakened into the as me consciousness.
Step 1,
in fact,
step 2. I'm almost at step 3.
and you too can be evolved.
That's right.
So as me is actually the truth of who we all are. It is at our essence. We are the divine incarnate. We are born to our human incarnation as this beautiful love consciousness, right? So that's really the truth of who we are. The to me, by me, through me aspects are the ways that humans show up in the world.
Okay,
And
so explain to
I
me.
I like to say first, there's way more than,
Yeah,
3-4
okay.
aspects
Right,
of
right, right,
consciousness.
right.
This is a model,
Right.
but it's a great model,
Yeah.
and it's really helpful in developing that witness consciousness
Understood.
of sort of understanding how I'm being.
Yeah.
So to me is when we're at the effect, otherwise known as victim consciousness. We think someone did something is wrong, somebody needs to fix it. Why me? Oh my goodness, how am I ever going to make it in life? Nothing is going my way.
If you don't mind, I would love to like really get into each one of these, if that's okay.
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me to do like a persona.
Oh yes, but you could do that too. But yes, 100%. But I just don't. I want to because I have questions about just the to me part, if it's okay. Okay. So
Yeah, of
please
course.
do the persona. I love it.
What? No, not me. Why is this happening? I can't believe you did that to me.
Right. I was like, I think I sounded like that earlier today. In my mind. So the to me consciousness is kind of sounds like where most of us kind of start.
I would say a large part of our culture hangs out there.
Yeah.
And again, we don't stop doing it.
Yeah.
I will pop in and out of victim here and there. The thing is, the more aware you become and the more open you are and the more curious you are, the sooner you notice and the sooner you can shift from this to me to one of the other states.
Do you think that the to me, because basically is that happened to me? I loved on your handout how you had this person, like it's this person's fault that this happened. And I mean, honestly, I have worked so hard on my spiritual and psychological growth, but when I'm super triggered and things are really like screwed up, I can easily realize that I've been in there all day. So,
Yeah.
So what do you think, what do you think is the payoff that we think we're going to get by believing it's someone else's issue, that is their fault?
Specifically, the payoff would be unique to that person and the different beliefs that they've cultivated and the way they're moving through life and their experience, right? Because we create scenarios to validate our beliefs,
Right.
sort of unconsciously.
Can you kind of give me an example of that?
Yeah, because I just had to notice I was doing it. So, so one of my long-standing, a historic way of being for me is my needs don't matter, and then my behavior is let me do a good job and take care of everyone else because I feel like I get more needs met that way
Yes.
than not getting anything met, right?
Yes, very, very common.
It's just a belief
Yes.
that my needs
Right,
don't matter.
right.
And I'm not going to get into the wacky, complicated situations that occurred that
Right.
had me believing that.
Right.
But so I've got this belief running in the background that my needs don't matter. And I've developed this coping strategy of doing a lot of stuff
Yeah.
to make myself feel like I'm good and to try to get other people to think I'm good
Yeah.
and all of that, right? And also, one of the things that I experience is that sometimes I'm not heard.
Right.
And I that hasn't played as big of a role for me, but I recently had an experience. It's so funny because I'm going to be talking about this on Sunday. I recently had an experience where I was needing some help medically, and I could not get a doctor's appointment. One of the doctors I wanted was 8-month wait. One of the other doctors didn't respond to my message. And I was just feeling like, nope, they're not listening to me. They're
Yeah.
And my mentor, who I do sessions with, we went through this process, and what I came away from that process was recognizing I require not being heard in order to validate my belief that my needs don't matter.
Check, please.
Yes. Yes. So,
Yeah. 100%.
yeah. I think I might have left my body for a minute. Hold on, let me go back.
I mean, that really is it. When you're in it,
Yeah.
you have no clue.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Wow. That's incredible.
Then as I did more deepening on this, because I'm just a little bit of a geek that way. So once I have a little insight, I'm like, ooh, I want to understand more what's really here and why am I feeling this and what's going on. And as I dove into it a little bit, I realized, oh, so this pain condition that I'm seeking help for in the first place has been going on for a while. And how have I not been listening to me? How have I not been hearing the pain? How have I not been meeting my own needs? Right?
Yeah.
So it always comes back, folks, I hate to tell you, but it always comes back to our responsibility.
Wah. Sure, what she's won, Bob. I so relate to that. And I also want to kind of say that, when something happens in your life that's kind of either disappointing or hurtful, that is so hard not to go there. I had an experience where something didn't work out the way I wanted to. And my first train of thought is, whose fault is it? Who was talking shit about me, or who was, you know what I mean? Whatever. Where all the places you go.
Yeah.
And
it just makes me have compassion for that one, though, right?
Yeah.
Because, that's the beauty of this work is like when we start to recognize that part of ourselves or parts of ourselves that are holding those beliefs and that have developed those coping behaviors and that are still like letting this thing run the show. It's like when we can embrace that part and love that part and accept that part and like say, okay, I got this. You don't need to keep running around like a maniac anymore.
Yeah.
Then, we develop that compassion for ourselves and we can kind of slow the roll, calm it down a bit.
Yeah.
And then we have this compassion for other people.
Yeah.
We can understand like, oh, he's not an asshole. He's just got his other stuff going on that's making him have this thing running in the background.
Yeah.
Right?
So you're making me think about when something like that happens, something doesn't work out the way we want to, or we get hurt, and when we get hurt, a lot of times I think we feel fear. And, and I think, could it be that the to me and the blaming is an attempt to control?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So on that handout in that to me quadrant there, it talks about victim consciousness, right? And it says this includes the victim triangle, which is the villain, victim, hero, drama triangle, the codependent triangle, where we have no boundaries. And all we're doing is dancing around trying to gain some sort of feeling like we have some control over our circumstances.
Right. So
I don't want to go too far into another topic, but 100% yes, it's can I please feel like I have some control over my circumstances?
And doing that is trying to figure out, right? With the who's to blame and
yes, because in that to me consciousness, we are on the victim triangle.
Yeah.
So we're either the victim or we've got someone saving us or we've got someone making us wrong.
Right.
And as the victim, we can blame the villain. And then the hero is going to be like trying to make everything okay, and then all of a sudden they're going to be mad at the hero because she shouldn't have gotten involved. And I say she because that's usually me.
Yeah.
And and it just goes around and round.
Yeah.
And you're not just one; you're all of those.
Yeah.
You just sort of find people who really fill the bill to be in the corners that match where you are, right? And we usually hang out in one or two of the corners a lot. Yeah, I mean, I did this dance with my kids for years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we could, I think, go even as far as to say we're projecting it on everyone, and we're all three in that moment. We're all three, because I know I do that. I was just thinking about that. I'm like, when something happens, the first thing I will do is just turn on myself and be like, what did you do? Or what did she do or he do? And how am I going to get myself out of this? And woe is me. Yeah.
Yes. In fact, you don't even need anyone else to be on the triangle. You can do it all by yourself.
And I have. Okay. So we're in that space. And like you said, I'm going to reiterate what you said, which was, you don't just go 1, 2, 3. We come in and out and we catch ourselves, and you just had a moment with that. I just had a moment with that today. And you're a minister, and I've been on the spiritual path for a million years. So yes, when you are in the to me aspect and you feel like other people have control over a situation and they have more control, maybe, for whatever reason, they're your boss, they're, whatever they are. And how can we have a better view of the situation? What can we say to ourselves? What can we remind ourselves?
So one of the keys of moving out of the drama triangle in general is, and I love, this is a really big idea, it's I am 100% responsible for 100% of my thoughts, feelings, and actions 100% of the time.
And that's painful.
It's a big one.
I have a lot of wacky thoughts.
Yeah.
Some of them are entertaining, and some of them are really stressful.
Yeah, so the key in this is remembering that we don't get our power out here.
Right.
From someone else, from their approval, or because they're going to give us this thing or do this thing for us. We get our power from within.
Yeah.
And that is the huge step.
Right.
Is remembering to always come back within.
That is good.
And the next couple of ideas are that having a healthy expression of how we feel and taking responsibility for how we're feeling rather than blaming someone else for it.
Yeah.
And saying, this is how I'm feeling,
I think
I'm going to move to do something different because I don't want to talk to you about this right now until I get my head straight, whatever it is.
Especially if someone is being super manipulative and passive aggressive, and how can we go back into our power if we're in a dynamic with, say, a boss and they're passive aggressive, or they're manipulative, and that's just the way they handle and so what can you do in that situation if you're in the to me experience in that?
Well, so I just want to clarify, because if you're in a situation with someone who's manipulative and abusive and controlling, it doesn't matter. I should say it doesn't matter. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are into me. It means that you're in a relationship with someone who is controlling and manipulative.
Yeah.
And you have to decide, like, do I really want to be in this relationship?
Right.
Sometimes it comes down to saying, I gotta go.
Yeah.
You can't change the person.
Yeah.
You can't. They have to change themselves.
Yeah.
You can be supportive of change. You can, change the way you interact. You can develop boundaries, because that's another thing in the victim consciousness, in the victim triangle. There are very unclear boundaries.
I think,
although the villain can have really hard boundaries, the victim usually has very little boundaries.
Yeah,
or
and
none.
I definitely think that when you lack or you really struggle with boundaries and you get confused and people easily can bulldoze your boundaries and you don't realize it until you're like so stressed. Those of us who struggle with boundaries are really vulnerable to the to me. And so, you know, leaning into our spiritual power feels like a really beneficial thing.
It's important to remember that when we're in that position of feeling like at the effect of or a victim to something or someone, that we're outsourcing our power.
Right.
We're giving our power to someone else. So always coming back to sourcing the power within, remembering whatever you call your higher power, just please have one, and always turn to that. And from there, establishing what healthy boundaries are, and that's a whole nother conversation. We could talk for hours about that.
Yeah. But I think I just wanted to say that because I think it's especially for people who struggle with boundaries, the to me is definitely hard to see when
Yes,
you're in that position.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
If you're in victim consciousness, you generally don't have boundaries.
Right. That's a really powerful point. That's a really
Or
powerful
you might be trying to like create really unrealistic boundaries.
Right.
But that usually means you've gone into the villain part of the triangle,
right.
So,
I think for a lot of folks who, struggle, they get out of the to me and then all of a sudden they're in it again. And I think boundaries is a big,
boundaries is a big thing.
Yeah.
And, this is all sort of stemming from our first families, our early relationships, and these dysfunctional family patterns just sort of play out in all of our relationships until we understand something different.
Right.
And, I remember early on, hearing someone talk about boundaries, and I was like, boundaries?
What are
I was like
boundaries?
disgusted by that. Boundaries? It sounds like such a horrible thing. It's like, yeah, because you don't have any. You don't even know what they are.
Boundaries are terrible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Healthy boundaries and healthy communication really support that empowerment. That is one of the steps to moving into the by me and being able to then drop into through me. It is the act of developing some boundaries, understanding what that means.
I was just going to say, like, as you were saying that, it was coming into my mind as well. It's like when you're really predisposed to manipulation and people just, disrespecting your boundaries, it's kind of like you have to start performing surgery on your attention, right? I mean, like, get out of them, come back into you, scalpel.
Yeah, it's wild. But, that's the difference between a codependent relationship and an interdependent relationship.
Right.
And sort of knowing where I begin and end and where you begin and end.
Yeah.
And like not merging and expecting this other person to respond and act and do and say and be all the things you think they should do and say and be.
Right. Or being on the other end of someone who is trying to get you to acquiesce to their moods and their whole drama. And the reactions I have found of people when you pull your energy back is they don't like it.
No, they
do not like that shit. But it's how, I agree with you, it's how you get out of the to me. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And remembering that your power is in here, not out there. And another really important piece of this, I think, is when we look at the drama triangle in general, the codependent triangle, it's always there's a superiority inferiority
Yes.
thing going on all
Absolutely.
the time. We're in this mindset of feeling less than or better than
Right.
through the whole thing.
Yes.
It's like we think, oh, they can't do it, I better do this for them.
Right.
That's hero, right? Or the villain, like, they can't do this, I better go do it for them.
Yeah, right.
And the victim is like, oh, I can't do this. They're the less than, right? So another really powerful move here towards the interdependent relationship is getting out of inferior superior thinking.
Oh,
You know,
that is so
really
powerful.
looking at it
Yes.
like, if we can get a handle on that and go, okay, I am not less than,
Right.
they are not better than,
Right.
or vice versa.
Yeah, and so
They just are, and I just am.
So-
and now what?
Listen, babe, this conversation with my guest, Rev Linda Jackson, was so fucking juicy, I made it a two-parter. So join me for part 2. Love you so much. Thank you for joining me. This has been the Spiritual Shitshow podcast, and I'll see you on the next one. Roll it, darling.